Democrats are not the only people backing Joe Biden as we get closer to the November election. A growing number of Republican political action committees and other groups are working to unseat the president. Additionally, a number of high-ranking current and former Republican officials have announced that they will not be supporting Trump in the general election. Sarah Ewall-Wice from our political unit joins me now. Hey, Sarah, the New York Times reported a number of Republican leaders will not be supporting the president in this upcoming election. Some of them include former President George W. Bush, Senator Mitt Romney, and former Secretary of State Colin Powell. How unusual is it that a number of prominent Republicans are publicly declaring opposition to the party's nominee during a presidential election year?
It is somewhat unusual. I should note that Secretary Powell actually did endorse Hillary Clinton in 2016, and he also endorsed Barack Obama in previous elections for president. But vocally talking about it like a former president and senators is something unusual. What is really unusual here is a number of Republican groups, not just taking cues from the top, but just watching what's happening in the world, are actively taking their own steps to strategically engage with Republican voters and right-leaning independent voters to tell them that they should and could vote for Biden. If they don't vote for Biden, they should perhaps leave Trump's name blank on their ballot. This has been something that groups have been kind of looking at since last year. They've done research for it. They've been really trying to focus their messaging, and just starting more recently with Biden clinching the Democratic nomination, have they been actively, publicly engaging. They're not just reaching out to the voters, they're going and putting money behind their actions with these massive ad campaigns on television and digitally. And it's really something that, while we have seen Republicans go after Republicans, specifically in primary elections, we have not seen something of this nature specifically on TV in the general election. And that's where I've been really taking note and noticing the trend has been changing, and strategists have been telling me the same thing.
Yeah, Sarah, let's talk about one of those groups that's actually putting money into trying to defeat the president. The Lincoln Project is co-founded by George Conway, who is married to White House counselor Kellyanne Conway. Can you tell us more about this group and Conway's previous allegiance to the Republican Party, which had up until Trump been fairly strong?
Sure. So the Lincoln Project kind of got started at the end of last year. They really started because they were seeing the president, and what they say is that he has been shredding the Constitution and the rule of law, and that's where they've really shifted gears. They started airing their ads specifically in March on television, specifically focused on Fox News, somewhere that the president is likely to see those ads. However, it's in May, what we saw at the very beginning of May is they aired an ad called Morning in America, a twist on Reagan's 1984 re-election ad. And what it did is it highlighted the pandemic and the numbers in terms of jobs and health concerns. And it aired on Fox News. Of course, the president ended up tweeting about the group and that ad, and that really gave them a place on the map. And they've really taken off ever since that beginning of May when that ad aired. They raised $2 million in 24 hours. And then at the end of this quarter, from April through June, they raised $16.8 million, really putting them in a rival position with Democratic PACs, which are also taking on President Trump and supporting Joe Biden at the same time. According to the Lincoln Project founder, their average donation is about $55. And then they also told me that those donations have been coming in from all over the country. It's a little unclear whether it's Republicans who've shifted and independents who are funding that effort. With that said, their target is Republicans and independents. And moving forward, because they now have that funding, they're thinking of going down into the battleground states. Right now, we've seen more nationally aired ads and really having a ground game, reaching out directly to voters in battleground states and explaining to them why they don't need to vote Republican in this specific election.
Well, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about some of these other groups, Voters Against Trump, which aims to help GOP voters. support the idea of not voting in this election or not voting for President Trump. What are some of the reasons they say that people who voted for Trump in 2016 will not actually support him now?
Right. So the Republican voters against Trump is actually, they've been collecting videos from Republican voters across the country. Started out with about 100 videos, and they've since moved on to 400 and more videos that are sent in by these voters on camera, where they explain what their reasoning is behind why they first voted for Trump in 2016 and why they won't be voting for him again in 2020. Some of the different things that we've seen are voters saying they just couldn't stomach Hillary Clinton. Other things that we've seen is, specifically as we're in the middle of a pandemic, is Trump's handling of the coronavirus. Others have talked specifically about his use of Christianity. One man mentioned the fact that he'd been raising the Bible in the air. That Lafayette Park photo op that they had really set him over the edge. So that is something that there have been a couple of different reasons all surrounding most recent events, but also they're across the board. And they're also coming in both from battleground states as well as all 50 states across the country. Separate from that, there's another PAC called 43 Alumni for Joe Biden, and that PAC launched just this month. What they've been doing is really kind of looking out for the former George Bush alumni and gathering them and trying to get them to help with their efforts to support Joe Biden. They're planning on being a more grassroots effort, reaching out to their network, their vast network of Republicans and former Republicans. And that is something that they're still in the planning stage really of, but they're hoping to grow into the general election, into the fall. And with that said, I should mention that while the Republican group, the Bush-related group, is not directly connected to the former president. It is his alumni and some of his former officials. He has not endorsed that effort specifically. With the Republican voters against Trump, they've been working on their digital campaign, but some of those different voices have made it into some national TV ads, and they also have been starting to really focus on those battleground states moving forward.
Yeah, Sarah, we expect some level of independent voters to switch sides during an election cycle. But I really want more of a reality check on how widespread this is. Are these Republican voters that you're hearing from likely to actually cast a ballot for Biden, or is the concern that they are actually just going to choose not to go to the ballot box at all this time?
So that is actually something I have been asking these groups about, because if you look at polling, there's no disillusionment from the people I've been speaking to that President Trump does have a strong support group in the Republican Party. I think Quinnipiac's most recent poll had 84% of Republicans specifically voting for him if the election were held today. So what these groups have been doing, they actually had been looking at a challenger for Trump in the primary. That obviously never came to fruition. Now what they're doing is they're trying to strategically chip away at that base so that it's a smaller group. So they realize that, yes, they're not going to get a large majority of Republicans, but they're kind of trying to shave it down, get those independents that actually were on the fence about Trump but voted for him in 2016 not to vote for him. So it's a kind of a balancing act, specifically in these battleground states. They note that in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Donald Trump won the election by a very small margin. So if they can get a combination of voters to stay home, as well as getting some of those other voters to vote for Joe Biden, they think they have the mathematics right, that they can help throw the race towards Joe Biden. But again, they also do realize that there are Republicans that are just simply behind Trump all the way.
Yeah, the polling for the president among the registered Republicans, as you say, remains very strong.